Let's do a college football preview for the Maryland Terrapins. This is a super exciting team, in my opinion, to talk about. There's a ton of interesting storylines. Last year, they had a very disappointing season after kind of making a lot of moves in the right direction. I'm going to get into the stars, talk about a couple storylines, the losses, and the additions for this team, and then, of course, get into my lovely record prediction. Let's talk about the stars first, though. On offense, Dorian Fleming transfers in from Georgia State. Last year was a high-impact guy, if you ask me. He had 550 yards, 6 touchdowns for Georgia State for the Panthers, and I do think that he will have that type of impact yet again. The new offensive coordinator here at Maryland will be looking to get him involved. I'm going to talk about that in just a little while. Now, as well on the offensive side, weapons group, Jalil Farouk from Oklahoma. He was injured the vast majority of last season. You didn't get to see him, but 2 years ago, he had about 600 yards for the Sooners, and that's something that I think that he's going to have to come in and fill the hole. Maryland loses its top 2 pass catchers, and Jalil Farouk will have to be one of those guys that steps up and makes a massive impact. Now, the last star player that I'm going to talk about will be my first storyline, so we'll come back to him. Defensively, Jalen Husky, the safety from last season, absolutely went to town in the tackle game. 45 tackles as a safety, 3 interceptions. He was a massive help for this Maryland Terrapins defense, who really struggled last year. I thought he was one of the guys that kind of held the team together. Big glue guy, if you ask me. And then to pair with him, Dante Joyner, who in my opinion is one of the best corners in the Big Ten, maybe even college football. 7 pass deflections, 2 interceptions last season for Maryland. Those are 2 guys that are going to have to shore up this Terrapins defense. I don't think the front 7 is going to have a great year, so the secondary is going to have to pick up the slack, and those are the 2 guys to do it. First storyline that I want to talk about, and my star player to watch out for, Malik Washington, the 5th highest ranked quarterback out of this previous year's recruiting class. He was a 4-star, not a 5-star, but he is going to be one of the only starting quarterbacks as a true freshman this upcoming season. That is a big spot to put somebody in either the biggest or maybe second biggest conference in college football. He's going to have an absolute gauntlet of talented players to go through. He's going to face, I don't even know how, countless amounts of NFL players. And to be honest, he doesn't have the NFL-style talent on his offense. However, I do think he has a more than capable skill position group. The offensive line, not something to write home about, but this is going to be extremely interesting to watch how he handles this. It's, once again, very rare, especially in today's age of college football, that you see a starting quarterback be a true freshman. We'll see how that goes. That is probably the number one thing to watch out for. If Maryland succeeds, it will probably be because he has stepped up in a mature type of way and done the exact job that Talia Tungavaloa used to do a few years ago for Maryland. If they're not succeeding, it's most likely because he's young and inexperienced and he's made several mistakes, or just can't make the play that a seasoned vet could do. So with that being said, that's storyline number 1. Let's talk about what Maryland lost and gained so far in the offseason. The losses size of things. Ruben Hypolite, not sure how you pronounce that last name, but linebacker for the Terrapins last year. He was the leading total tackler. I don't know if he was the signal caller. I can't remember off the top of my head, but he was the guy that really got after the football. Almost every single play where Maryland made a stop, he was a part of that tackle group. Now, was he a solo guy? Not necessarily, but he is a team guy that went to the football every single play. Maryland is going to duly miss him as he goes to the Bears in the offseason. Ty Felton and Caden Prather, I believe is his last name, how you pronounce that. Those are wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. Now, I talked about Ty Felton in the offseason in my NFL draft preview. He was a guy that I thought was going to become a starter in the NFL. Now, Prather, not necessarily, but respectively, Felton goes to the Vikings and Prather goes to the Bills. Both of those guys might make the 53-man roster. I'm more confident in Felton than I am Prather, but we shall see. Regardless, both of those guys were massive for the offense last season, especially with that kind of anemic passing game. How involved they were was extremely important, and that's something that Maryland's going to miss this upcoming season. Now, defensively, 2 guys that I want to talk about. Caleb Wheatland transfers over to Auburn. He was the leading sack He was leading in sacks for Maryland last year. Getting to the quarterback is probably the most important thing defensively nowadays with how often offenses are passing the football. And so to lose your leading pass rusher, that is a massive loss that I don't know if Maryland can come back from defensively this upcoming season. They might have to look into next year to rebound from that. And then on the secondary, Dante Trader, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. He gets drafted to the Dolphins. He was second in tackles. He had 4 pass deflections and an interception. Now, speaking of a gadget guy, he was all over the field. He's that strong safety that can help in run support, drop back in coverage. He makes big time plays. Reminds me a lot of Keon Sabb for Alabama, if I do say so myself. So that guy is going to be duly missed for Maryland. Now, moving into my other storylines that I want to talk about. Number 1 is Mike Locksley. Is his job on the line this upcoming season? I think it's definitely in the question. Now, of course, since 2019, he was hired in 2019. Since 2019, he has taken a step in the right direction almost every single year, except for last season. They finished 4-8, very disappointing year. And honestly, they were really missing their starting quarterback for the majority of the Locksley era, Talia Tungavaloa. He, I believe, is the all-time Maryland Terrapins passing leader. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but maybe look that up after this video. That is the key here. The offense struggled. They took a massive step back. They lost almost every single Big Ten game. They're going to have to do better this year if Locksley wants to, number 1, keep the consistency and winning culture in this locker room, but number 2, possibly keep his job. I think he could be on the hot seat. Maryland is hungry to win something, maybe not a Big Ten championship, maybe not a playoff bid, but a bowl game, absolutely. So Locksley's kind of on the hot seat, in my opinion. He's going to have to win early and often if he wants to keep his job. Second storyline that I want to talk about is one guy nobody's really talking about. That's Pep Hamilton, who has been a seasoned journeyman offensive coordinator. He has gone around the college football ranks. He got into the NFL ranks. Now, looking at some of the guys that he's coached, let me pause real quick and explain. He's taken a 3-year absence from coaching major football. He is now back. The last time he was on the scene, he was the offensive coordinator for the Texans in 2022. So looking at some of the guys that he's coached in his time as an offensive coordinator / quarterback coach, Justin Herbert, Andrew Luck, Jay Cutler, Alex Smith. I'm really excited to see how he develops Malik Washington. If Locksley and Hamilton can stay together in this group and coach up Malik Washington, shoot, we might be talking about Maryland being a serious contender for something in the next couple of seasons. This year, I think it's out of the question, given Washington's age and lack of experience. But in the future, Maryland could compete for something serious if they keep these recruiting classes up. May I also add that Maryland probably had their best recruiting class this past offseason they've had since maybe 2020 or 2021. So this young group of guys is going to have to step up over the next couple of seasons and keep Mike Locksley's job on lock. So with that being said, let's talk about my X Factor game and my lovely record prediction. First up, the X Factor game. It is the 5th game of the season, and it is Washington at home. Now, this Washington team is going to be missing their starting quarterback from last year, Will Rogers, gunslinger type guy. I believe he's one of the all-time leaders in passing yards for a career. That is kind of where Maryland was at last season, missing Talia Tungavaloa. I think Washington is going to take a slight step back from relevancy, and that's where Maryland must step up. If they can beat Washington, I think a bowl game is in the conversation because some of these other games are winnable, especially given the fact that they're at home. And that's what I'm looking at with Washington. That will be game number 5. Let's hop into the record prediction, and maybe I'll talk a little bit more about why that Washington game is so unbelievably important. So let's get into a game-by-game record prediction. Number 1, FAU at home. They are not the FAU of Lane Kiffin. This is not a team that's competing for a group of 5 slot into the playoffs. I do not think FAU will even sniff beating Maryland, although this is Malik Washington's first game of his career. We could see a closer game than usual, but I will be confident in taking Maryland to beat FAU week 1. Now moving on, NIU. Northern Illinois, the beater or the upsetter of the championship runner-up from last year, Notre Dame, could they go in and beat Maryland? Absolutely. But if you take that Notre Dame game and they play Northern Illinois 100 times, Northern Illinois only beats them the one time that they actually did. I think similar logic can be applied to Maryland. I don't think it's 1 out of 100. I think it's more like maybe 10 to 15 out of 100. So I'll give Maryland like a 70 to 80% chance to win this game. That's why I'll chalk it up as a win. So starting off the season 2-0, they play Towson, who is an FCS opponent. Not even a question to ask me if Maryland will win this game. I think they absolutely will. So a 3-0 start for the year. They go at Wisconsin. Now, Luke Fickell at Wisconsin has struggled to start his tenure there, but I think Wisconsin has got one of the better rosters in the Big Ten, playing in Campbell, I believe it's Campbell Stadium, something along those lines. That's a tough place to play. Alabama played there last year. They looked like they struggled in the first quarter. I'm picturing the exact same thing for Maryland. It's hard to play on the road, especially versus a Big Ten opponent. So I will give Maryland the loss there. So now 3-1. And this is where the X factor comes in. If you can beat Washington in week 5 of the college football season and go 4-1, then the momentum will kind of roll over, and I can see Maryland winning a couple more games. However, I do think Washington is much more talented offensively, and their defense, in my opinion, is slightly more capable and competent. That's why, even though they're at home, I will give Maryland the loss here, slipping to 3-2, and that's where the snowball kind of goes and starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger. As these losses start to pile up, so does the effort required and the talent required to win these games. So then moving into Nebraska, Dylan Raiola is somebody that I've been really high on coming into year 2 with Matt Rule. I think they'll be able to click. It will be a shootout versus Maryland, but looking at Malik Washington versus Dylan Raiola, I will take Raiola any day of the week. So now 3-3, I believe. Yes, 3-3 heading into the 7th game of the season. That is at UCLA. I've talked about it in a lot of my videos, and I'll talk about it again here. It's extremely tough for an East Coast team to travel all the way to the West Coast versus a competent, comparable team to Maryland and win. So because this game is on the road, I am going to give Maryland the loss there, slipping to 3-4, and now it starts to get a little ugly. Hosting Indiana, this could be a game that Maryland keeps close, but once again, Indiana has been able to take care of business so far under Kurt Cignetti. I think they can do the same thing here. So now 3-5, road trip time at Rutgers, at Illinois. Rutgers is an extremely underrated team that I don't hear anybody talking about in the Big Ten. That's going to be a team to watch out for, in my opinion. I think that they'll beat Maryland with ease. Same thing with Illinois. Most people aren't talking about them being a college football playoff contender. I think that they absolutely are. And so to host a team like Maryland, who will now be on a 4 or 5 game losing streak, that should be a team that can be easily taken care of. Heading in now to the last couple of games of the season, they host Michigan and then play Michigan State, I believe, in a neutral site game in Ford Field in Michigan. So, neutral site game, whatever. That's an away game. Michigan is a college football playoff contender. They did struggle last year, but I think that was due to the anemic quarterback play. I do not think we'll see the same problem here for Michigan this next year. Bryce Underwood is a true freshman quarterback, kind of like his counterpart Malik Washington, but one of those guys was the number 1 overall prospect in the class and one of the highest graded prospects ever. And the other one was the 5th in the class. So I will give the tip to Michigan, who has a much more talented team around Underwood. Washington might be able to step up and keep that game competitive, but I doubt it. And then versus Michigan State. Yes, it's a neutral site game, but it's really a road game. I don't think Maryland's going to be able to come out of this season with some kind of momentum. It's going to be really tough for me to see that happening. So to close out the year, they go on, I believe, a 9-game losing streak. They start the season 3-0 and then lose the rest of the games throughout the regular season. They finish 3-9. I think Mike Locksley is out the door, unfortunately. I do think he's a good coach and a really good recruiter. He will find a job easily after this one. So, with that being said, that will close out my Maryland college football preview. Let me know what you think of the Terrapins season in the comments. Maybe I'm underestimating the talent they have offensively. That being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.